round view, well, semi-structured interview, and we can do edits. So if there is something, we'll basically go right. Well, here's a sound file, and you can go, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You've got.
Do you want me to try and, if you ask me a question, repeat the question, so try and make the sentences as complete in and of themselves as I can, just so you can edit it later?
I think just go with your gut.
Conversation, yeah.
You speak very clearly, and as if you were in a pub, communicating with your colleagues. You've been communicating this for many years,
right?
And take the conversation where you feel it needs to be.
And do you want a level of storytelling and personal, like how I got here, do you want? Or again, is that
it's what
comes out in the conversation?
What lights you up
is
the best indicator of high quality.
Okay.
In my experience, it really is. Just being, people who love what they do tend to get very good at what they do.
Yeah. Okay.
So.
All
right. Hello, Joanne Tippett. I'm very pleased to be able to sit here and ask you a few questions about your work.
Lovely to be here. Thank you. Yes.
So, for those who don't know about yourself and your work, can you say a bit about yourself and what you've invested your life in?
Yes, so I'm Dr. Joanne Tippett. I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Environment, Education and Development here in the office at the University of Manchester, where we're having this conversation. And I've invested my life work in working out how we can actually think about and design the world we want to see. When I was a teenager, I was furious about the environment and really just couldn't. The nature and the environment has just been my passion since I can remember, from really early teenager, having an organic farm and thinking, well, how on earth would you put pesticides on a farm? This is a terrible idea. And then I got really into green activism, but I didn't want to just be against something. I wanted to figure out what we wanted instead. So that led me early on to permaculture and designing systems that work within nature. And the real passion that's driving me now is something we've developed called the round view, which is a way of thinking about the future, which really helps us see how humans could redesign our systems and fit within natural systems so that we stop causing environmental problems in the first place. How do we know if the actions we're taking are actually moving us towards genuine sustainability or not? That was the question I was asking. So we could be doing all sorts of good work. I was out planting trees and working with land management in Lesotho and thinking about how we could make this place better. But how do we know if we're going in the right direction? How do we know if this is really moving us towards sustainability or not? And that's the deep root thinking that led to the round view. And I guess it's come from decades of thinking about what is it we know about the Earth? And this led me initially to learn the Natural Step program, which is an extraordinary framework for sustainability, which is built on scientific consensus about what we know about the Earth. And it's created this really clear set of system conditions that tell us what we're doing that's unsustainable. The round view came out of trying to teach that in the context, ironically, in Tesco. So we were working in Tesco, looking at how to scale up sustainability learning from the shop floor to senior management, and really trying to think about how to teach the natural step. So I thought this is a brilliant scientific framework for understanding sustainability. Trying to work with how to translate that into something that could be understood from the shop floor to senior management, something that could be simplified to the point where it could be communicated clearly. And in the process of doing that, we were also trying to come up with the positive opposite. So again, it was that drive to not be about what is it we don't want, but what is it we do want? What's the opposite of those negative system conditions of sustainability. So the natural steps got this brilliant way of understanding what we're doing to make a problem. And we were trying to recast that as the positive. And in recasting it as the positive, we needed to slightly shift the understanding of the underlying mechanism of what's causing the problem, all built on the same science, but turning it to the root causes of environmental problems from the mechanism of harm. So taking that understanding of how the Earth works as a system, imagining you're standing on the moon, looking down at the Earth and saying, how does that work as a system? Really clarifying that into something that every primary school child could understand, basically. So we're looking at the Earth, thinking how it works as a system, thinking what it is we're doing to mess up that system, and then what's the positive opposite so that we could start designing human systems so we fit within it without causing those problems in the first place. That's the root of where the Roundview came from. And all of this was coming from a perspective of almost like, I guess, our theory of change is that if we have a positive vision of what it is we want to see, we're more likely to act and move towards it. It's empowering. It makes you excited. It helps you really think, I want to be part of that. But if it's based on a really clear scientific understanding that that would actually move us in the right direction, we're more likely to make good decisions, to avoid unintended consequences, to avoid things like replacing lead in petrol with MBTE, which ends up polluting the groundwater because you've understood the root cause. So if we have this positive view, and it's widely shared, we will have more dialogue, more action, and more confidence in that action that we're moving in the right direction. That is our theory of change, that would help us really spark transformative change. That then requires really thinking about how to communicate this in a way that is accessible, inclusive, works from primary school to postgraduate to policymaker, and creates a shared language that can be understood across ages, levels, cultures, sectors, disciplines, a shared language that's rooted in our shared story that can be understood from all of those levels and that is meaningfully understood. So it isn't just telling a story, it's working with people to help them understand their place in the story, working with people to really understand and build their own knowledge and put the pieces of the puzzle together to see how they understand this and how they can apply it. So it's all about building a deep understanding in a communicative way so that people build that knowledge together and it becomes a habit of mind, a way of thinking. The Roundview doesn't give the answers. This is what we should do. It gives a way of thinking so that whatever it is you're thinking of doing, be it designing a building, a farm, a product, putting in a heat pump, thinking about how you're going to get to school, you can ask the key questions to see what is this moving us towards sustainability or away from sustainability, and making sure that you've got a holistic view of it.
Fantastic. You mentioned in there systems thinking. Now, how would you communicate that to somebody who isn't familiar with the term?
How to communicate systems thinking. It's looking at, it's a way of thinking that says, what is it we're looking at? Every single thing is part of something bigger. But at any one point in time, you've got an area of interest. You're thinking, I'm looking at building. I'm thinking about a neighborhood. What are its parts? What are its inputs and outputs, and how is it connected to other things? It's just a way of looking at the world that says, what's the area of interest? What are its connections? What are the parts? How are they put together? What are the inputs and outputs? How is it connected to the larger whole? And what's important about that? What can be changed to make it fit better within ecological systems? I sometimes say that we need to learn to think like an ecosystem. So we make whatever our human systems are run off sunlight, rainwater, and give out nothing but clean water, building biodiversity, soil, and any product that can be reused and recycled again and again and again. So when I'm thinking in terms of systems, I'm thinking about flows of resources. I'm thinking about the parts and the pieces and how they're put together and how they fit on a landscape. So for me, it's a way of looking at complexity and simplifying it in a way that makes it meaningful so that you can actually ask questions about what can be done differently.
So you mentioned that you grew up, you had an organic farm?
Yes.
It's conjuring pictures for me.
It was a small holding, so we had one milking cow, a few sheep, Snuffleupagus, the Gloucester spot sow, chickens, ducks, 2 horses. It was wonderful. It was my mum and my dream to have a small holding in Yorkshire. Yes, having moved back from South Carolina, so that was what we did when we came back, and I'm so glad I learned to do that. I have to admit, it was hard work, though. Getting up in the morning at 6 in the morning, milking a cow on a milking stool covered in ice. I mean, proper sort of, Yorkshire luxury. You think you had it tough. When I were a kid, I had to get up, milk cow in the ice,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's such a big step to go from food magically appears on the shelves of supermarkets to, well, okay, all of this appears in an ecology and has inputs and outputs and costs and I think it would be very interesting. Well, I know personally from my own experience that one of my big awakenings was going to help on small organic farms.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting looking back how important that decision for it to be organic was as well. Because I remember reading John Seymour's The Good Life and reading about natural pest control versus pesticides. And it just resonated so deeply. How can it be the right thing to do to put poisons onto the landscape? That cannot be the right thing to do. So I think it was a very deep awakening about the nature of materials and chemistry. And I come from a family of chemists. My mum were chemists. My dad was a research chemist. And we used to actually have quite big arguments about chemistry and about industry. And it was interesting. It was learning the natural step. It was the first time my dad and I were able to really have a more meaningful conversation that got beyond, I'm right, you're wrong, the chemicals are bad, the environment needs saving, into understanding why on a deep level there was a problem with something like PVC. Rather than something that could go back to nature in a way that could be built back into the building blocks of nature, or something that could be inherently, constantly recycled without ever putting anything into nature that doesn't belong in nature. And that we had those conversations quite early on, and it completely shifted our relationship. And I think that was part of my drive, is to help build the kind of dialogue that gets us to, well, let's work out scientifically what it is we do agree on, and then let's figure out how we use that knowledge in a way that's productive.
Yeah. I think more and more people are becoming aware of new chemicals that have never existed before, that have a profound impact on health and well-being, and as far as we know, they're just always going to be there. But there's this interesting black hole of information in industry. If it makes a lot of money, why question a good thing?
Well, there's something almost inherent in the logic as well of patenting and understanding the economic drivers, that something which is novel can be patented, that can be made in a way that makes people money, that I think drives some of this, that drives some of the novelty, and novelty in natural systems in chemical terms is a problem. So I think there is something quite profound here, but equally there's very interesting innovation in, well, how do we come up with the chemistry that fits within the chemistry of life? And how do we come up with the material processes and the product design processes that allow for disassembly, that allow for materials to go back into the same material quality and be reused again and again? It's a very different way of thinking about design.
And so this is why you've developed the round view. It's a series of tools. How would you describe the round view? Because it's a way of thinking, but I've also seen lots of they aren't props. There's almost an element of play in the things that you create that help that bring people together around problems, and ideas start joining up. So yes, how would you tell us more about the round view
as a thing?
As a thing, yes.
So the round view, we describe the round view as a toolkit for sustainability thinking and learning. So at its most basic level, it's a way of thinking. At its most basic level, it's a way of thinking about core principles of sustainability. So it's a framework. It's a way of saying, what do we know about how the Earth works as a system, about the root causes of environmental problems, the way that human activities messes with that system, and their positive opposites, so that we could start to stop doing that and actually design things that are designed around the positive opposites of the three root causes of all environmental problems. And you do need to consider all three. So you have to take a systems approach and think holistically across the whole way we design our materials and our spaces and the energy we use so that it fits within this system. So that's the thinking framework. And there's one fourth guideline, which is around the impact on people, because it is about humans within this system. So we say there's the three scientific root causes of all environmental problems. They're positive opposites, and you need to consider all three. And you need to consider the impact on people, because you could design a perfectly sustainable system, for instance, that's run on slavery, but we're part of the system and we want to make it better for people and nature over time. So what we're trying to build here is this habit of mind, that we're thinking into the future. We're thinking of doing something different. We're thinking of designing something, making a decision. And people start to say, is this going to cause one of these three root causes, or is it in the positive opposite? And what's the impact on people? And you can't, that becomes a habit of mind internally and in dialogue. The reason it's also a toolkit is we've taken those core principles and developed physical puzzles that help teach the principles in a way that helps guide people through thinking about them. So it helps people connect their story and their thinking and their understanding to these principles in a way that helps it stick. And we've designed these literally physical puzzles that include poetry, play, and art that help guide people through the thinking, get them to ask questions, but do come together as puzzles with the right answer. Because part of what we're trying to get across here is the scientific integrity. It's not like, oh, well, I might just say that there's only two root causes, or I've got different root causes. No, we do need that clarity of thinking. So the puzzles are designed to make it a dialogue, to make it easy for other people to teach this. So much of what we've been trying to do is to scale this up and get this beyond feeling the need to be an expert in sustainability to teach this and think about it. So the puzzles help encourage that dialogue. They build the knowledge through the games, through the puzzles, through the play, through the poetry, and they do click together, literally click together into the right answer, so that there's a clarity in the communication and the spreading of the ideas that's got integrity to that framework and the model. So it's a very deep pedagogical process that has taken decades of thinking about and experimenting and trialing different tools and ways of working, and the extraordinary privilege of working with poets and artists to really think about how to teach this sustainability in a way that has a deep emotional resonance and a deep pedagogical power.
I think that mentioning of emotional connection is something that is so often missing, and the fun, the play and the art, that is very powerful. I of course seen a few sessions which you've run, and it really is interesting how a bit of play can grease the wheels and carry people through a series of complex ideas, but effortlessly.
Yes. And what is really interesting is, yes, what we're teaching is quite deep and quite complex, but we've worked so hard to get it to the simplest possible way of understanding it. And we have been teaching this now from literally year one primary through to the Mayor of Salford, the UK ambassador to UNESCO, but every level. Of course, you frame it slightly differently, but we're using the same tools and teaching the same principles across all those levels. And that's I heard a wonderful colleague with, I had a wonderful conversation with a colleague recently who actually was doing the environment, she was doing the Masters in Education for Sustainable Environments. She's working in FE, and she's been using the Roundview toolkits in further education colleges to teach how to teach. So just using the tools and then asking she's teaching hairdressers and plumbers and electricians who want to become further education teachers. They don't have a teaching background. She's using the Roundview tools to just have a play and then think, what did you just learn? How did you learn it? And what did you learn about learning? So basically teaching social constructivism theory through these games and sneaking in a bit of sustainability on the side. So she isn't coming in to teach sustainability. She's teaching about teaching. And I had a point to make and I've completely forgotten it. Something about simplicity. I got a bit sidetracked with pedagogy there, didn't I?
So she teaching further education, people who are wanting to learn about learning.
No, it'll probably come back to me. But I think there's something. It's that idea that we don't want to sacrifice the quality of the ideas and the scientific integrity.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was it. That's what I've come back to now. She had this wonderful, we were then talking about what are the limits on where you could use the tools? Is there somebody too young or too old? Or is there a problem? Is there a limit to where we could use these tools? And how do we, and we were also talking about how do we assess the impact they're having? So you can run a 1 hour workshop or a 2 hour workshop, and then you could say at the end of that, how do you feel? What have you learned? But and obviously we've got to be able to do that because some of the time that's all you can get. But really what you want to be able to do is have a longer conversation and have people learn it in early on in primary school and then a bit later in primary school and then come back to it in high school and think, well, now what have I learned differently? It really does offer a scaffold that you could scaffold your thinking across an entire learning career around. And she had this wonderful metaphor she thought of, which was what I'd really like to see is that we start to get the Roundview a bit like almost a vaccination. You get your first shot at the Roundview, early years primary, and you just learn sort of we're an animal. We're part of nature. Plants make food. Animals eat food, and we're part of that cycle. And there's some things we do to mess it up, but we could design things differently and not mess it up. And then later on in primary school, you go back to that and you actually link that to concepts of photosynthesis, and you link that to concepts of inputs and outputs and heat and how that works and what that means. Why is carbon a problem? It's not a problem because it's inherently a problem. We're built of carbon. We breathe out carbon. The problem is too much carbon too fast. And you start to learn that in primary school. Perhaps then those older kids actually go back and teach the younger kids, and they're learning through learning. And then they get another shot of that vaccination in high school, where you start to apply it to design technology. You look at it from a historical perspective, because we set all of this story in the long story of time, 4.55 billion years of the earth and civilization. And you think about different inventions and cultures and how that helps us understand this story. And then you really start to think about it. And then when you go on into your career or your further education college or your university, and you start to apply it in your context, and you start to say, well, hang on, right, how can I use this thinking to really make sure that the work I'm doing is moving us towards sustainability, and you deepen your learning over time. And I just thought that was such a wonderful metaphor. And it is part of the challenge we're in at the moment. It's almost like we need to come up with evidence of the impact. And we're trying to come up with evidence of the impact from where we have been able to teach people. And we get a huge amount of feedback around that. I think the really interesting thing is it's hope. The big bit of feedback we get from almost all the workshops we run is, I feel more hopeful. Now, a few people, admittedly, at the end of a workshop say they feel less hopeful because they hadn't realized the scale of the problem. But anybody who has already realized we have a problem, there is a problem, they mostly say they feel much more hopeful because they say it's the first time I've been able to see that we could do things differently. And if you can't see it, you just literally can't even see that there's a way that humans can fit in. I do think quite a lot of environmental messaging is almost, well, we'd be better off without humans.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to do here is say, well, we are humans. Human life and civilization is an amazing thing. Culture and humanity is wonderful. How can we rethink that so that we see that we're part of this natural system, and that we could do this without just saying, well, we just need to get rid of ourselves. And so I think hope is that one of the big things. I've just been analyzing the feedback from a workshop I ran for Siemens Energy and Norfolk Wildlife Trust. And what was really interesting with that was there was an element of the hope and the more positive feeling afterwards, like seeing the solution. But the other really important aspect here is clarity, the idea of, I hadn't understood that you need to look at possible solutions and think about possible problems with them to avoid unintended consequences. It's helping see the holistic view. It's helping me take a round view. I mean, it is helping people take a round view and actually think about things in the round. And one of the things I say to my students is, it's a lot cheaper and a lot better idea to spend an hour or so thinking about the implications in the round of a particular action or idea than to put in a bunch of investment and then find that you've really, really messed up. And a classic example of that right now is heat pumps. Heat pumps are a wonderful idea. They use a little bit of electricity, which could be renewable, to heat and cool our buildings. But most of the heat pumps we're putting in use Freon as the coolant, and Freon is another forever chemical, which is actually an incredibly potent greenhouse gas. It does escape. You can see the adverts for it, refill your Freon into your heat pump. Well, it's going somewhere. And there are perfectly good heat pumps on the market that don't use Freon, that you learned the lesson of moving from CFCs to HCFCs in refrigeration when CFCs were a problem for the ozone hole, replaced with HCFCs, which then were a potent greenhouse gas. And then in refrigeration, you quite quickly had to move on to butane and propane. The natural step, which is that clarifying those root causes of these environmental problems, almost said that was exactly the conversation they were having with companies like Electrolux at the time. Like, is HCFC a persistent synthetic chemical? Yes. Is it going to cause a problem in the future? Probably. Is it therefore a good investment decision? No. So that clarity about saying, what are the questions we need to ask so that we can avoid those unintended consequences and think holistically? And then the other bit of feedback we do get, and this is that inspiration for action, that sense that with that hope and that clarity, you've got more of a sense of, well, actually, this is worth doing. I want to be part of this. And I'm feeling more like, yeah, I'm moving in the right direction. So we have got evidence. It's largely kind of gathered in feedback after workshops, anecdotal evidence. Some people we talk to later, it's quite hard to track people. But then what is it we're trying to measure? Do we want to measure the impact of just learning the round view once has? And clearly I want to get more people to learn the round view at least once, but really it could help to have it embedded more thoroughly into the education system, embedded more thoroughly into an organizational thinking process. That's what we really want to aim for. We say that we're aiming for the round view to become the fourth R. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and the round view, a way of thinking, a skill that everybody on the planet can understand and apply to whatever it is they're doing at whatever level of scale.
It seems so very obvious from a history of very siloed thinking, where the development of capabilities and skills has been divided into these very rigid, regimented class subjects. This is maths over here, and this is chemistry over here, and this is physics over here, to increasing awarenesses of interdisciplinarity, how each is interconnected as an aspect of a tangled reality.
That makes me think a bit about probably the power of including the art and the poetry in the way we're teaching it as well. And the movement and the fact that patterns and the colors, so that even somebody who can't read yet or ever perhaps can still understand that thinking. So we're working on multiple levels of the learning process as well. And it has been really, really exciting to hear from people with quite profound learning difficulties that they can still learn from these tools as well. Because for a lot of my career, I've been told, you can't teach that sort of thing to community members, or it's too complicated or too scientific. And I've been absolutely adamant that people can understand. It's not the concepts, it's how we're teaching it that's the problem. And I'm really passionate about working with people to understand these core ideas at wherever they're coming from, at whatever level. I really think that everybody on the planet can understand this, and everybody on the planet needs to understand this, because then we've actually got more chance of moving in the right direction, holding power to account, and just coming up with the ideas that actually can spark the most amazing thinking of like, oh, well, why don't we do it like this? It's to me, it's all about looking for the opportunities and the synergies, but then having the rigor of mind to just check against those root causes, whether or not they're business as usual, slowing the damage, useful, good idea. If you're causing a problem, it's definitely a good idea to do it less quickly, but it's not enough. Like switching off the lights and turning off the tap and just having slightly more energy efficiency isn't going to get us to the transformative change where we're not causing the problem in the first place. We need to change direction and create the systems and the techniques and the tools and the designs that could be fully aligned with sustainability. And then we need to have the systems upgrade and the change that they are fully aligned with sustainability. And we need to think across these 4 dimensions of thinking about the nature of the material. So the 3 root causes. Well, perhaps now is a good time just to go into the systems principles and the 3 root causes. Let me just have one more sip of tea before I need both hands for this. If we think about how the Earth works as a system, it's a closed material loop. Everything that's on that Earth is the same stuff that was there 4.5 billion years ago, once the orbits had settled and gravity had settled and we had the Earth. We are basically reorganized stardust. Sunlight comes in and heat leaves, and basically that's it. I mean, the odd meteorite falls down, and we get enough energy behind a few rockets to shoot a few rockets off. But basically, the stuff stays there. Sunlight comes in, heat leaves. Plants use that sunlight to make food and drive the cycle. It's a cycle. Cycles of materials, and nature's the engine. Nature's the engine that drives that cycle, moving it round and round through photosynthesis in plants. So that's the basic level. We know plants make food, animals eat it, they poo, they die, it's broken down by the decomposers, goes round and around, materials flow round in balance, nothing but heat leaves. So what are we doing to mess up this system? So it's a cycle, nothing but heat leaves. The first thing we can do is destroy the engine. So if it's plants that are driving it, we could literally gouge out, cut down, build over-extract the engine, nature. And if you think about a human body, we can do that to the human body. Cut things off, break an arm. Okay, cut off the head, we die. Cut off a few hands and digits, we're damaging the engine. The second thing we can do in a cycle, it's a cycle of balance, materials flowing around, is overwhelm with too much too fast. Perfectly natural stuff. Mainly carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, things that are the building blocks of life. We're just pumping it so fast, largely from burning fossil fuels, that we're overwhelming the cycle. And that's where we get that huge blanket of carbon dioxide and methane and nitrous oxide, which is holding in the heat and the greenhouse gases. Then, in a cycle, we could poison with stuff that doesn't belong, stuff that cannot be broken back down into the building blocks of life, things that never existed before. And if you think of every single environmental problem, they're caused by one or a combination of those three. Some environmental problems are particularly wicked ones because they're caused by all three. So climate change is obviously the one we really think about is carbon dioxide. That's too much, too fast, natural stuff. But equally, Freon and some of those Freon and some of those synthetic coolants are potent greenhouse gases. So there's some of those forever chemicals that are actually also part of the greenhouse gas problem. And if you destroy huge swathes, for instance, of the rainforest, you lose those white clouds, which are reflective, and you're increasing the heating of the earth. So you're losing that kind of natural cooling ability that we get from ecosystems. So those are the three root causes. So in order to be sustainable, all we have to do is the positive opposites. We need to restore and connect ecosystems. We need to balance our flows of natural materials, which basically means learning to live off solar income and sunlight and make sure that everything goes back into the cycle in a way that builds fertility and doesn't overwhelm natural cycles. And we need to make sure that any poison that we use, so for instance, in the future, when we have mobile phones or wind turbines to make our electricity that use plastics and metals, that we can cycle any poison, the material that doesn't belong, in the technical loop. We can take it apart, turn it back into materials at the same material quality and use it again and again and again and again and make sure it doesn't get into nature. And if we do all three of those, we would have a perfectly sustainable system. But we have to do all three. You can't just do one. You have to look at all three. And then, like I said, there's that fourth thing to think about, which is the impact on people. What is the impact on people's health and well-being? And that's where you get into it's not just about how we're interacting with natural systems, it's how we're interacting together and making sure that people have enough and they have the opportunities and the capability to live a good life. Now that gets into much more discussion about what that means and how we do that. But in terms of the direction, is this action fostering health and well-being or undermining health and well-being? We can ask that question. So that gives us these sort of core principles about how we need to move towards sustainability, what it would actually mean to move towards sustainability. And those could be understood by absolutely everybody. The creativity comes in how we apply it. Now, how you achieve that, that's open to a huge amount of interpretation, but any decision, any idea, any thought could be tested against that very simple framework to say, where is this on that spectrum? So is it business as usual, slowing the damage, changing direction, or fully aligned with sustainability on the pole of physically damaging nature and ecosystems or restoring them, overwhelming natural cycles or balancing natural flows, poisoning with stuff that doesn't belong, or cycling any material in the right loop, undermining human health and well-being, or fostering human health and well-being. It is that simple.
It's bringing to mind so many age-old pieces of wisdom that are in tips of so many people's tongues. Like, I love the expression, measure twice, cut once.
That's good. Yes, that is a very good one. Yes. My father used to say that his woodworking teacher used to say there's a saw for cutting off, but there's no saw for putting back on again. Yeah, similar sort of thing. And there, of course, there is within this an inherent, I suppose, precautionary principle. If you've got something that matters, then don't mess it up. And it's interesting, you think about the analogy of the human body is quite interesting here. So I talked about with the physically damaging nature, there's an analogy of cutting off a hand, breaking an arm. From a human body, there's an analogy that drinking water is really good for you. You need to drink several liters of water a day. But if you drink 5 liters of water in 2 minutes, it will kill you. Even eating too much ice cream can kill you. It's possible. So too much of a good thing can be a problem. Yeah. But equally, if you take that glass of water and you put a few drops of pesticide in it, then that could kill you as well.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between water's good for you, but you can drink too much of it. But if you put something that doesn't belong into your body, then that can kill you. And that's the difference between like the forever chemicals and carbon. We say something within the round view, there's 2 different kinds of pollution. So one is too much, too fast of perfectly natural stuff. And the other is just, it's the wrong kind of thing. It shouldn't be in nature at all. And that leads to slightly different solutions as well. So the solution to the wrong kind of thing, the very first solution and the best one is not to use it. Substitute with something that does belong. If there's any way you can substitute something that can be broken down into the building blocks of life, do that. And that's especially important when you're thinking about light, small things like packaging, which are very hard to get back. And they end up in nature. They just always will. Mm-hmm. And even clothes is another really interesting one as well, because almost everything that all of us wear now have got dyes and synthetic fibers in them that make it almost impossible to put it on a compost heap and turn it back to nature. But these are small things that unravel and get out into nature. That's what they do. Mm-hmm. So the first and the best thing is to substitute with something that can go back to nature. But then if there's a particular technical need, or for instance, generating electricity or battery, then you want to think, how can the thing be designed for disassembly and taken apart? And in particular, how can the materials be separated such they can be reused at the material quality? That's what we call within the round view changing direction. Then fully aligned is when you do take it apart and get it back into the material loop. Because there's one thing to design it such that it can be, and the other is to actually make sure that that happens.
Yeah.
So that's the distinction between changing direction and fully aligned, particularly important for poison and design for disassembly.
It makes me think, you mentioned forever chemicals, of course, these are being used as fire retardants and in fire extinguishers and the like. And of course, I've seen some of the projected costs of clearing these up in the future. And if anything speaks to a stitch in time saves a 9. It is it's so important to think, what about tomorrow?
And they're so ubiquitous, and what is it doing in our bodies? And when we think about forever chemicals, we all have DDT in our bodies, and that was banned before you or I were even born. This was one of the things that the natural step clarified so well. The natural step went even further back to the basic science principles that we agree on. So we've built on that, building on the shoulders of giants, 100% here. So the natural step, and Karl-Heinrich Robert's work in particular, taking scientific consensus, saying, what do we know about the Earth? What can we agree on it? And saying, right, the most basic level, matter cannot be created or destroyed. matter tends to disperse, entropy increases. Biological and economic value lies in the concentration and structure of matter. And photosynthesis is the only net producer of that concentration structure of matter on Earth. So you can see where the scientific roots of the way we've recast it as a story, if you like, come from. So you can take the story we have, which is it's a cycle that's driven by nature and photosynthesis. Only sunlight comes in, only heat leaves, nothing else goes. That's the kind of like the comprehensible story of that. But depending on your audience, you might go further back. Like I've ended up in discussions about laws of entropy and the law of the conservation of mass. Brilliant. You don't need that to understand the round view, but it really does show, like, if matter cannot be created or destroyed, if nothing is leaving the earth and we create these chemicals that cannot be broken down, they will build up, they will disperse, they will have unintended consequences. And one of the brilliant things that the natural step did was it said, let's not argue so much about is it causing this, is it causing that? It particularly came from there was a great swathe of seal deaths in Sweden in the 1980s, and the people arguing, is it PCBs, is it this, is it that? And Carl-Henrik Robert said, well, we don't really know what it is, but we know that it's almost certainly something to do with the chemicals that we're creating. Can we look at what it is we agree that if we're creating chemicals that don't belong, that will break down, they will cause a problem at some point. Therefore, it is a bad idea to do that. And so rather than having arguments about how fast, how much is too much, let's have an argument about what is the most basic understanding of what is likely to cause a problem at some point in the future, and then let's stop doing it.
Is this what is known as the precautionary principle?
I think it's the most profound expression of the precautionary principle. It's getting it down to root principles of what the precautionary principle is. Yeah. Yeah. So rather, it's sort of saying what is likely to cause a problem in the future. Therefore, let's design our system to not do that in the first place.
Because I have heard people, the casual response to a lot of industry is to pivot to the place of going, how much can we tolerate?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Which seems very precarious way to go about it. How much fossil fuels can we burn on our streets, and how much respiratory illness is tolerable.
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like the logic breaks down. So I can see this framework being very helpful for brokering discussions about health, well-being, capabilities within societies, and designing those so there's a positive cycle, a virtuous circle, rather than something feels like slightly like the wheels are going to come off the clown car at some point.
And sadly, we are seeing more signs of that happening. And I think one of the impetuses for me of getting the round view out into the world as much and as fast and as far as we can is the growing sense of doom that we're seeing, particularly amongst young people. And I just think I feel so heartbroken for people who look into the future and they can't see that it might get better, that it's just, they just see problems and they're terrified. And I think we have to come up with something better than that. We have to come up with a positive vision of what we can do. And I don't think that just saying, stop doing this and we're against this and we're against that, that's not very inspiring. What is it we want? What do we want to see? What world do you want to see? Innovation. We still want innovation. We want creativity. I still think that beautiful clothes and warm houses and ways to travel and see the world are wonderful. I mean, I think when you think back in human history, most of human inventions were to make things better, to increase culture. We learn to grow wheat and then bread. And we learn to make beer, and then we learn to count, and then we learn to write, and then we learn to write poetry. And all of these things are wonderful things. And most of the inventions of the Industrial Revolution were about, yes, it was making money. Yes, it was productivity, but it was also new medicines. It was also new ways to build houses. People were made more comfortable. People could suddenly have clothes and shoes in a way that they couldn't have before. And nobody intended to destroy the environment through that. It wasn't sort of like, let's really completely destroy the environment. It was a human desire to innovate, to make things better, to invent things, to create new ways of doing and being. Why don't we work out ways to do that in a way using this knowledge so that we don't have those unintended consequences? Because I don't think it's not very inspiring to think, well, let's just go back to the Stone Age, because if nothing else, there won't be that many of us there weren't that many people living in the Stone Age. And actually, some of what we've managed to invent since then is pretty nice. I mean, trains are great. Bicycles are incredible. I'd like to live in a world where I can still travel.
I am so with you on this. It's and I really like that you're making a concerted focus on that, to move from deficit thinking to a constructive, a joyous vision of future, a joyous vision of business and industry that just doesn't have the same problems of where we've come from.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be negative. I recall from one of your workshops, you were prompting people to think about just how much energy comes from the sun in a day.
Yes. The question there is, how many days would it take how many days of sunlight would it take to equal the total reserves of fossil fuels? Every single bit of fossil fuels that we could get our hands on and burn, that's considered the reserves. And it's 18 days of sunlight. And it cannot be beyond human possibility to capture some of that and turn it into the energy we need, instead of burning fossilized fuel that took carbon and sunk it out of the system, cooling the planet down 385 million years ago, and we're burning it in the blink of a geological eye. At the moment, with the war in Iran, in even more of a horrific blink of an eye, to no purpose whatsoever. But we could be capturing that sunlight. And indeed, if we were to put, some recent research suggests that if we put solar panels on half the world's roofs, we'd meet our entire electricity needs. It could be done. And indeed, Pakistan right now is not suffering anywhere near as much from the energy crisis and the cost of living crisis from the rise in energy prices, because they've put so much effort into bottom-up solar panels. And they have insulated themselves in a way from some of these global shocks. It's a smart thing to do as well.
It's systems thinking.
Yeah. Yes.
They were not putting all their eggs in one basket.
That's right.
And going, well.
Yeah. Well, you asked about systems thinking. I think there's a really good point that is really important to make with systems. One is, so what's the boundary? What is it we're looking at? What are the parts? What are the connections? What's the network here? What are the bits? What are the inputs and outputs? And what does it do? And what do we want it to do? So, for instance, thinking about transport, we don't want to design for cars. We want to design for mobility. How can we design such that it's easy to get around cities and between cities and out to rural areas, and it's easy for young people, old people, people with physical disabilities to do so? Now, cars will be part of that solution in some places, but systems thinking says we want to design for mobility in a way that actually is effective for as many people as possible. That's thinking in systems.
Yeah.
Yes. Or we want we want to have a comfortable house. Well, one way to do it is to just pump a bunch of gas in, burn gas in a gas heater. Systems thinking is, what are we trying to design for here? We're trying to design for good ambient temperature. Is there any way we can use the flows of natural resources around us to do that? So solar energy, can we use massive insulation? Can we use if we need to cool, can we use air pipes and cooling systems? And there's some wonderful ancient technologies, particularly from, for instance, Persia, with the sort of towers, cooling towers that pull air up from deep down and circulate it through buildings. Like, that's systems thinking. What is it we're trying to achieve, and how can we use the materials around us to do that in a way that's effective?
Yes. Well, you brought to mind a systems thinker, Stafford Beer. Have you come across him?
Yeah.
I watched him talking about how sometimes the tool can be the problem, the thing that fixes the problem in place. So you were mentioning what are we designing for? Well, it's mobility. Well, sometimes when we're all tooled up with cars, we become reliant, dependent, fixed in place by the tool we use to achieve that mobility.
Well, and there's a wonderful example of that. I used to travel to Texas fairly regularly, and Waco, Texas is designed around the car. They said, well, let's pedestrianize downtown Waco. It didn't work very well because all the shops are so far apart because they're designed for people to get in a car and drive. So it's almost like we haven't just become fixed by the tool of the car. We have put obdurate infrastructure in place, which is making it very difficult to redesign that for the kind of mobility that comes from active transport. Mm-hmm. So we're sort of almost building in centuries of difficulty of redesigning. No, it's not impossible. It can be done, but it doesn't come from just saying, oh, we've got this system, let's just replace the car with an electric car and then we solve the problem. We've got to really think about how do we move? How do we want to move? How can we move effectively?
Interestingly, in Spain, there have been pedestrianizations of cities. Very reluctantly at first.
yes, lots of protests, weren't there? Yeah.
But when asked 9 months later, the populations just went, "Oh no, don't change it back. We just love it."
Yeah,
clean air, and funny enough, during one of the few things that came out in times of COVID, I really appreciated seeing all these businesses spill out onto the open space.
Yeah.
And I wondered about the concept of space pollution. All this space given over to cars.
Well, you might remember when we run the Round View workshops, we often evaluate an electric car against the Round View evaluation tool. And I often hear this gasp when I get to, overwhelm, poison, overwhelm, balance. Obviously, the electric car is getting away from fossil fuels. That's a good thing. And people often come up with the problems. Oh, but the batteries, it's using lithium, it's using cobalt. What's the problem with the batteries? That's on the poison aspect. But the gasp comes when you say, well, but look at the amount of space that cars take up when they're moving and when they're sitting still. And that is space that is not space for nature. It is not space for people. And so you to think holistically, you have to think about all of those implications, not just let's just replace fossil fuels in cars are a problem. Yes, they are, but just replacing the fuel isn't going to solve the problem. Yeah.
Am I right in saying you've been working with UNESCO?
Yes, I was very fortunate to have a British Academy Innovation Fellowship with the UK National Commission for UNESCO to look at testing the Round View in two different contexts. One was in the context of a biosphere, so a sort of large-scale landscape planning process. So we in this case we looked at the River Nith, and did community workshops along the River Nith with the community and stakeholder members using the round view as part of the sort of framing. So that was one context, large landscape partnerships. And the other was in the context of the Manchester UNESCO City of Literature, looking at it as an educational tool, a kind of cultural and educational tool, and asking what difference does it make to think about sustainability when you set it in the global shared story and using this sort of pedagogical approach of understanding our shared story.
Mm-hmm. So it really is a way of brokering conversations.
Yes.
The toolkits, and people can go to your website.
Yes. On the website, we've got various stories about how it's working. It's a really interesting question. We are developing digital ways to learn the round view. It's very difficult to get it to be as pedagogically enjoyable and to have the kind of dialogue that you get. Not impossible, but much more difficult. So at the moment, what we're really looking for is ways to get more of this physical toolkit into more galleries, public spaces, particularly, I think libraries are so important in this. Libraries are places where you take durable, good quality stuff that people can use again and again. Because most people don't need, for instance, a round view toolkit every week. They need it maybe once a semester, or when they're thinking about a project, or they've got new staff coming in, or you don't need it all the time. But when you do need it, having the quality, beautiful, physical tools that spark this dialogue is really important. And this is our big question now, is how do we get this into these physical spaces such that people can use them? And part of what we're trying to do with the round view is find the kind of people and the ways that we could be doing that through the round view website as well. So we're starting to build interest in a community through that. So that's roundview.org. Yes. And we're really looking to build a community. I think one of the most exciting things for me this last few months has been so I've been teaching my own students the round view for years now, and increasingly using these physical toolkits. So I've been running workshops I have classes of 100 to 150, and we have 100 students all playing these games, and it's really interesting. And there's always some of them who just say, that's transformed my thinking. I want to do this. This has transformed the way I think, what I want to do. And I've been able recently to work with some of these students where they have been taking the round view toolkit to a local library, running workshops with school classes coming into the library. So these students who aren't experienced facilitators or teachers have been using the toolkit and running workshops with these primary schools. And to me, that has been so exciting, because it's just the proof of that concept that these toolkits can actually make it easy for other people to run it. It's like, I want to take myself out of the picture here. Yeah. It's almost like it became, initially, when I was thinking about these hands-on tools, the very early days, I was thinking, how can I teach the natural step when I'm not Professor Carl-Henrik Robert? So I know that feeling but he has such expertise and knowledge, and I don't have that. How can I teach this? And I started making these kind of diagrams and ways of teaching it for myself, because I was scared to teach it. And then I became so good at doing that people said, well, how can I teach this if I'm not Dr. Joanne Tippett? And it's almost like I had to say, no, you can, go, you can do this. But what we found was, in the early days, when we were asking people to do that with the knowledge, the slides, some pictures, 2-dimensional, like worksheets and things, it did work, but it was very much harder for people who had less confidence to go out and do that. And the physical toolkits we've created now that literally click into place, it just gives people so much more confidence. We've developed most of the puzzles have this 2-stage process where you give out some wooden bits and ask people to think about it and puzzle it out. And usually you can kind of get part way there and people make connections and they think about it. And then it has an answer frame piece that comes together and actually gives the answer. Yeah. Or with the wooden blocks that build a puzzle, then there's a certain point where oh, the pictures formed and the the poems come together, and now I see the meaning behind it, and you can see so you kind of know when you've got it right. And that's been really, really profound on multiple levels. One is, yes, the answer will be there. Don't worry, if you forget one of the root causes, the answer will come out in the end and it'll be there. But the other, it's been the fact that that's built that journey and that discovery together into the learning process in a way that is easy for even not less experienced teachers to do. Like a really good teacher probably doesn't need this. Or it might just make a really good teacher able to do really good teaching with larger groups. Like now I can teach 100 people in that kind of dialogic way that I don't think I could have done without that toolkit very easily. But for somebody who's a bit less experienced or less confident, it just gives, it's not a crutch, because it's not a crutch. I call it a boundary object. It gives a way to spark that conversation through the physicality and the tool itself that helps guide people through it. I mean, you can't just kind of like open the box and, well, it'd be interesting to open the box, dump it on the table, see what happens. I mean, people were still going to learn something. It does need a little bit of guidance and a few questions in between, but that's part of the process. But it's much easier for people to do. And for me, seeing these students go out and working with, and I'm blessed, and I've worked with year 1 to year 9, which is quite a range. In libraries, and they've all said they've got something out of it. They've learned something. The students were so inspired. They've written poems about what they've learned. And yeah, it's been really, really amazing, actually.
I get where the real physical space where we're social mammals.
Yeah.
And we spark and chime off of each other. And I remember I took a visit to Quarry Bank Mill.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And I discovered your Roundview stuff in there, and seeing how people were, particularly children, were chiming off of each other and filling in and tumbling over each other in that playful way. But also, groups of adults, moving this object there and that, and trying it a different way around. And the digital is different. It's different. And educational technologies, I've been trying to think about what are the importance of these. And I like your coining of a boundary object. Because I keep on going back to, mustn't mistake the technology for the teaching. Yeah. When I boil it right back, it is being in dialogue. The voice, the conversation, the in a space, using all of our senses. It's one of the oldest parts of our habitat.
Now, the academic in me is going to say, I didn't coin the term boundary object. Yes. Yeah. Again, building on the shoulders of giants, and I think that's always often part of the wonderful thing about this. We've worked with thousands of people now. Well, I'd say hundreds of people genuinely giving feedback, like working with, should we have this wording or that wording, and trying out the poems. And we've been able to work with multilingual poets. It's been such a privilege working with different artists over time, and we're working with an amazing artist now that's really bringing things together. And I've been working, it's not just me, there's lots of people working on this, so I've got to just be very careful there, and that is part of where the power comes from. Yeah. As well, because it's come into this, and it's been learned and feedback and developed and tested, and it'll never be perfect, but it's really good now. And so I want to get this out into the world. But it's really, I do wonder sometimes. I really wonder though. If we want to turn this into the fourth R, we're obviously going to have lots of ways to do it. So we will have to have the digital. We will have to have the kind of free worksheets. We always want to have the ideas to be free, even if there's a physical, obviously if you make a physical product, it costs money and we have to pay people to put it together ethically in a good way and all that sort of thing. So we've got to have some sort of downloadable resources and free resources and make them as good as we possibly can and as close to this pedagogical process as we possibly can. I don't know how possible it will be to get it as good, but we'll try. And we've got to work on getting the poems into different languages. We've got them translated now into Urdu, Arabic, French, Spanish, Shona, and Scottish Gaelic, which is very exciting. We haven't yet figured out how to fit some of those onto some of the building blocks, because one of the things you learn is almost all languages, when you translate them, is they're much longer.
Yeah.
So there's been some really interesting questions about poetry and how we use this and the art and what images you're using. So if we have a skylark, will that translate? And there's definitely elements that need developing over time. But I've had this slight worry recently as well and it's come a bit from seeing some of my students go into different contexts, and then rightly, they'd like to have some of the Roundview kit to be teaching this to different people. So one of the students took some of the kit back to Taiwan, and one student's taken some to Northern Ireland, and that physical kit is helping them do that work.
Yeah.
But without the but have we created this thing that people think they need the physical kit to do it? It definitely makes it easier, though. I mean, there is no way around it. It does. And it costs money. It can't not cost money. Now, obviously, what we would like to do is find the kind of funding to actually say, I always like that Microsoft idea. I've had the analogy for me as the Microsoft idea. Every child has a laptop. Every child has access to the digital technology they need to learn. I want every child, every school to be within walking distance of a Roundview kit. And that will largely probably be libraries, but not always. But I really liked the idea. I was teaching this in an FE college where they were teaching teachers, and the FE college lecturer said, I was saying I want it in every library in the world. And she said, I think you've got that slightly wrong. I think you should have every school within walking distance of a Roundview kit. And I thought, blimey, that is good.
Yeah.
That is good, isn't it? That everybody's within walking distance of this. And one thing we're wanting to test, we're going to do some experiments in a school with the head of PGCSE teaching here. PGCE teaching for primary here is also a teacher, and we're on Thursday actually we're going to go and teach their eco council. Their eco council is then going to teach some of the members of staff. Right. So this is an experiment of children teaching, but we love the idea here is, what if we could get it that children in primary school, in school learn it, and then they say, right, family, it's a rainy afternoon, we're going to the library, and I'm going to teach you the Roundview, because they can then be and we have seen that already a bit. We've had enough Roundview kits at festivals and stalls that we met a family in Wigan during the Festival of Libraries, and then a couple of weeks later we had the Manchester Community Festival, and one of the students' helpers said that the very same little girl, and she was really quite young, I would say 5 or 6, came up, Dad, come here, come here, I'm going to show you, I'm going to teach you this, and she sat there and showed her dad how the Roundview worked using those puzzles.
And isn't that the way of life? I mean, you're just making me think about my godchildren, and just how much fun, how a big part of life is teaching and learning, but how much they've taught me.
Yeah.
It's like, right, Uncle Al, you're going to sit down, and this is what I'm going to show you this, and I'm going to tell you this, and Ileana is an eco champion.
Oh, brilliant.
And how much of the stuff of life that is, and it reminds me how brittle some of my thinking comes. You've just brought back lovely memories.
Nice. Yeah. So I guess that the real ambition here is so if we've created a physical toolkit, that helps people learn from primary to postgraduate to policymaker. And yes, it could still be improved. It could still be tested and developed, but it's, I feel like there's enough evidence building from practice that we can say this has got real value.
Yeah.
How can we get this into more spaces with really nice, clear guidance that says, well, if you've got an hour, this is a good way to use it. If you've got 10 minutes, this is a good way to use it. So that because we have realized we need to give more, like I say, it doesn't quite just open the box up, tip it on the table, and you'll get the best out of it. So yeah, but we're really working on that sort of like, okay, we're learning so much from doing these library schools. Well, when you've got half an hour, if you do this puzzle followed by that puzzle and ask this question. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then people will learn and they'll find their own ways to do it. But, we need to give that guidance up front. That's what's driving me now is how do I make that happen? How do I get this to scale? How do I get this so that it is in thousands of libraries and then millions of libraries. Why not?
Yeah. Well,
why not?
Surely Hasbro has a role to play here.
Hasbro?
The games manufacturer.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah.
I'd like to find or think that. I'm sure that there must be games manufacturers who understand the intrinsic relation. Mm-hmm. With learning.
Yeah.
And
the sustainability message, that sort of, that's an interesting idea.
So, with all this in mind, what are you thinking for the next, what are your hopes with taking your work in the next year?
I was going to say, what time frame are you going to give me?
Where do you want to go? It's got to be in every library and in every mind.
Yeah, every library, every mind. I think it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. We've started working with a few corporates where it would be a very good idea if people who are designing products and services have this in their mind and get to staff engagement and people feeling part of a bigger whole and feel like they're actually moving in a positive direction. And it would be even better if some of that engagement helped us get some of the funding to get this into libraries. So I'd very much like to create a virtuous cycle, if you like, of corporate engagement helps with community, with corporate social responsibility, getting toolkits into libraries, but also using some of their wonderful expertise in running community workshops or workshops in FE, so that it's not just here, give some money or give a kit. It's actually using that incredible energy that people have and the knowledge and skills in their local communities. So rather than just litter picking for your volunteer day is a good thing, but perhaps running a round view workshop for a local FE college is a better thing. So one prong will be working with companies to try and turn this into a process that helps fuel some of that activity. I do think we need a large grant to get this into libraries. My experience so far has been most of the libraries, I think a couple of schools and FE colleges have managed to find a little bit of money to buy one, but it's really, really hard to get that kind of budget to buy these toolkits. It has largely been grant funded or project funded or on loan. So I think I really do want it is a big financial ambition, and we're going to make them as cheaply as we can, ethically. So that's part of it still needs to be within a kind of round view principles of making the things themselves. So we're not trying to make some massive profit for profit's sake. We're trying to make the profit to get this into the places where it couldn't go otherwise. That's the idea. So it's very much a social business. There's the community interest company that's been set up to steward the round view is a community interest company guaranteed by partnership. So there's no profit to be made per se, but I do want to pay people for the work they do. That's incredibly important to honor people's time. So grant funding to get this into, I mean, I would love to say, for instance, we've already got real interest from the heads of services from the Greater Manchester Libraries. They're managing 100 libraries. They're really keen. We've developed a system with Susan Brown's input. She saw a set of drawers that people in a museum it was a step-by-step thing with drawers. And we've actually got a prototype now. It's so exciting where it's step-by-step with each puzzle and working on a flip book that gives the answers, and that can just sit in. So like what you saw at Quarry Bank, but a bit more, even more self-guided. And one of the things I learned in a lot of the libraries we've gone to is it needed to be compact and movable. They just don't have much space. So it was getting it down to this movable thing that then homeschoolers or people who are getting education outside of school from pupil referral units could maybe go to a library, spend an afternoon just going through that, or the family going into the library could use it. And then also have the set that could be loaned to a school, or the school could come there and run and have the workshop in the library. So that's going to need some money. And what my experience to date has been, it's not going to come from individual libraries and schools largely being able to buy it themselves. So I'm looking at how to raise that kind of money, how to get that kind of dynamic of getting these toolkits out there can be put at scale.
Yeah.
I'm an academic. I'm still going to need to do some research around that and write about it and find out how it works and do some analysis. I've got a bid that we're working on just at the moment to work with some colleagues from psychology and education and poetry, creative writing. I'm so excited to do some actual really in-depth psychological testing on what difference learning the round view makes. That's got rigor in that kind of psychological way. So this is really, really exciting. So we can go a bit beyond the anecdotal and into the sort of like, actually, this is the impact it's having on people's emotions, their knowledge, etc. So looking at different ways to test that. And then I guess looking at, well, what difference does it make in the world when it's out there? Can we start to trace ideas and things that come from this? That's challenging, but it's certainly intellectually very interesting and would be part of getting more energy and money behind it to get it out into more places. Desperately keen to see this into libraries in Africa and Asia and South America as well. I mean, there's a reason we've been working on these different languages. I did donate a kit to we worked with a wonderful poet who speaks Shona from Zimbabwe, and he translated some of the poems into Shona and took a kit to his sister who's been using it with very vulnerable children in Zimbabwe. And just, I mean, seeing the videos of these children playing with the puzzles, it's extraordinary. Yeah. So I want to see this in more countries. And yeah,
I mean, it really is coming into my mind that it's a way of linking the world, because sustainability looks different in every place. But you're bringing together the importance of different languages.
And the importance of the global shared story. I think the timeline game that we've made that starts 4.55 billion years ago and shows how if you imagine the story of the Earth is happening over a calendar year, the sky doesn't go blue until halfway through the story. And there's no complex life forms, nothing that even looks like a jellyfish until mid-November. And it's not until 22 minutes to midnight on the last day of the year, after we've had coal and dinosaurs dying out, the last day of the year, that we even get art and people living in the Stone Age and people living in caves. And it's 1.5 minutes to midnight, the whole of civilization. And that's all our shared story. That's our shared story of learning to grow grain, to grow, to write, to the wheel. It's the compass, windmills, all of that in that time. And then 2 seconds to midnight, the whole of the Industrial Revolution and all of that damage so quickly, but all the seeds as well of everything we need is in that story. Our human inventiveness. The first cars were electric. The first solar cells were invented 150 years ago. The first turbines from the Persians using it to grind grain in that story of civilization, to the first turbines to make electricity over 100 years ago. It's all there.
Yeah.
And that's our shared story. And I think that's part of what makes it so powerful as well. It's the story of the ground beneath our feet, and that is our shared story. So I do think, and partly why UNESCO was really interested in this, was UNESCO's mission is to build peace in the minds of people. And is there any better way to build peace in the minds of people than to understand our shared story and to think about what's the next chapter and how can we make that next chapter a positive story for people and nature? There's very little that I could think that is more worth spending time and energy on.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, that is just very inspiring. That's inspiring. Thank you very much. What would you like people listening to go away and spend a little time thinking about? Where,
Well, I suppose the first thing is to say, is there a toolkit in a library near me? And can I go and have a go and have a play with it? That'd be one thing. The answer is probably not yet, but how can we get there? And have a look at the website. We have got some materials and some resources. We're developing more. We're going to be developing more that will be free and downloadable. I mean, we've got a word search. We've got some lovely poems, we've got some lovely poems in different languages and recordings of poems in different languages. So there's already some resource there. So that's in terms of engaging with the round view. But what else do I want people to go away and think is just, oh gosh, we could design things differently. Actually, this is a choice and we could think differently. And if we were thinking differently, we could redesign things so that we don't cause environmental problems in the first place. That is possible. The most important message is that we could do things differently. We've got all the knowledge we need. We just need to learn to think differently. And I do like the British Transport Police slogan from this one. So we're starting to think, and in fact, I've even written a poem about it. We need to see it differently. So if you can't see, let me see if I can remember the poem. See it. If all we can see is a future of gloom, what hope for humans and nature to bloom? Say it, sound it out, speak together, explore ideas for making the world better. Sort it. From everyday actions to bold visions, a system redesign takes traction. See it. If we can't see it, that's, I think, the first thing with the round view is just you can actually just see when that puzzle comes together of the world as it could look if we design things differently. It's a really profound movement in your thinking that, oh, that's what the world would look like if we were actually doing the positive opposites of the root causes of all environmental problems. But then we have to talk about it and say, well, what is it we're doing? How can we do this differently? What are we doing? What could we do differently? And then we have to take action, which is sort it.
I heard a story from your colleague Susan Brown, from a story told to her by her father. And of course, Manchester's got a unique history in this. It was apparently, he remembers, the first clean air experimental zone in Manchester. And of course, I don't know this history, but of course, buses, they would have people walking out in front of the buses because there was so much pollution. And the bus drivers couldn't see 10 feet in front of them.
Wow.
And it was in Manchester. They went, let's do an experiment and not burn coal here. And he described it like walking through a curtain and you could see down the street. And I heard a different, and when I was in London looking at the history of the ragged schools, I came across in Stoke Newington Cemetery. It turned into an arboretum, and that when they realized there was a massive problem with pollution, everybody, people were dying and, suffering from terrible illnesses. And what they did was they planted up trees. And all these avenues started appearing. And all the cemeteries were turned into arboretums. And it sucked up all this pollution, and huge sea change was achieved. And that hopefulness, that achievement, I hear in what you're talking about. Thank you very much for it.
I have a lovely story along similar lines to that. And I think one of the things that has to give us hope here is nature is so extraordinary. If we give nature a bit of space, and I take my students out to the last coal mine that shut down in 1992. It's a massive coal mine in Wigan. And when I first was going out there, it's just still this bleak landscape of coal shale. And now it's this teeming landscape of rare birds, willow tits. It's a natural flood management basin. It's almost not as good a teaching tool anymore, because where's my ecological devastation? I have to show the historical pictures in the landscape and say, this is what it looked like. And the students cannot believe it. You cannot believe that transformation in just a few decades in that landscape. And to me, that's such a story of hope. And what's brilliant is that's been part of the Carbon Landscape Project, where we were very fortunate to get Heritage Lottery funding to work with a partnership across Warrington, Wigan and Salford, and taking this landscape with these little patches that people were very passionate about and build it into a partnership, looking at how to create step change across the landscape and link it up. So this is, from a round view perspective, restore and connecting that landscape. And we use the round view as an engagement tool for all the project partners, all the project officers, and schools and community groups in the landscape. And that, just seeing that as part of a bigger transformation. There's information boards in the sites we were working with. It's got the timeline of the story and this sort of some message of hope about where it's come from and what we can do. So that's one of our larger scale sort of landscape stories, that the round view didn't fix that. It didn't solve it, but it was part of helping people feel this as part of a larger story of hope. Yeah. And seeing it a bit more holistically. It's interesting, I've had that feedback from the Carbon Landscape, that doing the round view helped people get a bit above their own patch and a bit bigger and see it as part of a larger organism. And that came up with the River Nith and the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire Biosphere feedback as well. I suddenly saw the river as an organism. I started seeing the whole of the river and thinking about how it's connected. And I started thinking about the energy we use and how we move around the site and what chemicals are going into the river, as well as just the restoration projects, which is what people had been focused on. So I think it really does help just bring that bigger, more hopeful, but also that slightly more holistic view of, well, actually, if we're going to think about this, I think we also need to think about materials and energy and how the industry in the area. So those are two really strong demonstrations of the power of this way of thinking.
I think we need, there's demonstrable need to understand and realize that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And it's comforting.
Yes. Yeah. And often people say, well, what's the point of me taking this action or me doing the recycling if this isn't happening? But I mean, obviously, part of the point is the more people do it. But also, I think the round view gives us, yes, okay, you're right. That's not changing direction. It's not fully aligned. But here's some of the things that could be. And here's how what you're doing contributes towards that. And I think that really does help. Yeah.
Well, Joanne, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. I like nothing more than talking about the round view, I have to admit.
Well, it's bloody inspiring. I love it.
Thank you.
And it's a great opportunity to get right under the hood with there's so much that you put into this, and you've been working on this for decades.
Yes, longer than I care to think. I mean, the first inspiration for this idea was in the mid-90s in Lesotho. Yeah, in the mountains of Lesotho. So it's now 2026. That was, so that makes it 30 years.
And looking back to the freeholding that you grew up in, are there these retrospective reflections that take you back to living, like you say, like, right, get up, milk.
Milk the cow.
Milk the cow.
Yeah.
I see milk.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it's that sense of connection to nature was quite powerful. Yeah. And also, I'm quite glad sometimes to get milk coming in a organic milk, but coming in a glass bottle to my doorstep. It's quite nice, Yeah, so
glass bottle.
Oh yes. I've got reusable glass bottles. I'm very fortunate. So, but I think that sense of wanting to think, how do we make this better? That's always been there. I think. I didn't want to just be angry all my life.
Yeah. and I think that, understanding that there is that move from deficit thinking to it's not propel, I call to propel back into dark ages. It's actually a rich, vibrant future. And I think I got a lot of that from working on a farm.
Yes. Yeah. I think everybody should have that opportunity. I mean, in a way, it's a bit like I think everybody should have the opportunity to play the Roundview games and learn from it. But if everybody could have at least some opportunity to feel where food comes from, to collect water, I think a very profound thing for me has been when I lived in a village in Spain and actually in Lesotho as well. When you actually have to get water and you have a different appreciation of water. And I always say, if you fix water, you fix most things. Yeah, so to be just that sense of a bucket of water and where it comes from, and is it clean, and can I lift it, and how far does a bucket of water go if I'm drinking it, or I'm washing clothes, or I'm cooking? I think that's a very profound experience for everybody to have. And for me, I was so lucky to be able to work in Lesotho for 2 years. It was so incredible. Yeah.
It's inspiring. The more time goes on, I think maybe probably a lot to do with the more I'm paying attention to, the more I'm realizing that there's this fantastic and infinite world out there that I know only a tiny part of the British Isles. And I can't even imagine all the stuff and terrain and culture and knowledge of a continent that you could fit Europe into over 100 times.
It does make me sometimes, every now and then I have a panic about the almost arrogance, though, of then saying, we've got a framework that we have worked across the world, and I guess, but almost any innovation that's going to get out is going to require a certain degree of arrogance, isn't it, to make it get into the world?
Well, some things are just plain useful.
Yeah.
And I think people will get that. So,
and I suppose as long as it comes with listening and humility, that's the thing, isn't it? It's not, it's very much, how can this work? How does this work? How does this work in this context? That's been, and I suppose that my whole other invention was Ketso, which came out of that work in Lesotho as well. It's the other side of the coin, which is a toolkit for ensuring that everybody's voice is heard. And I think that's actually a really important part of the story. Is for me, I had this profound realization so I was working with schools, looking at land management, and I was burning green fire. I was, just out of university, I'd learned permaculture. We've got to do water harvesting and plant trees and organic farming and all this. But I knew that I couldn't just go with those ideas and plant them somewhere. it had to come from what mattered to people, and it had to come from what they cared about. And then they had to think, well, how could I apply these ideas and principles in this context in a way that works for me? And what I found was a few things. One was people still wanted me to tell them because I was the expert from outside, and I had to find a way to work with them to find out for them to find out what mattered to them, but also that women didn't tend to speak in mixed gender groups. And I needed to hear from everybody. And so that's where Ketso came from, is another toolkit, a way of hearing everybody's voice, a way of making sure that everybody's ideas are on the table in a constructive, creative way of thinking. Now, round view is like the direction, it's the compass, and Ketso is sort of the ground upon which you could grow those ideas. And so there's these two twin ideas that came out of that work in Lesotho. The word Ketso means action in Sesotho, in the language of Lesotho.
Right.
And so it means action, this idea of active learning and thinking together. So for me, the best future use of the round view would be twinned with that communicative planning, visioning process that hears everybody's voice in a multi-scaled, creative way.
So for the listeners, describe a little bit more about the kit. So it's a kit also.
It's also a kit, yes. I mean, it's also a toolkit and a physical toolkit. Yeah. And again, it's a physical toolkit that embodies the principles of effective co-production and engagement. So we working with a colleague, Fraser Howe, and I distilled 3 pillars of effective co-production: to hear everyone's voice, and Fraser, edit this in earlier. Fraser Howe is the other co-founder of the Round View, and we've worked together for years on thinking about effective ways to do this teaching and this work together, and to really make sure that it helped build skills and learning with other people. So Ketso, the three pillars of effective co-production are to hear everyone's voice, to structure effective creative thinking, and to link ideas across time and place. So what Ketso does is it takes these principles and turns it into a physical toolkit that makes it easier for anyone to run a good workshop. So it's almost like fuzzy felt for adults. Everybody has colored leaves and a magic pen that's washable, so the colored leaves are reusable and the pen is washable. Everybody has a pen. Everybody has a pile of leaves. And you have a few moments on your own to write or draw your ideas. So to hear everyone's voice, there's 3 really important things. One is everyone has the means to develop their ideas, the time on their own to develop them, then share. We call it think, then share, then discuss. And you do that in a staged process. You do that again and again, because if you just let people start talking, whoever starts talking first, everybody's ideas go that way. And the most confident people speak, and the least confident people don't speak, or the people who think they haven't got anything to say, or that they haven't got the right to say anything. So, but if if everybody's got some ideas in front of them and everybody can see it, and you have a structured turn-taking process, so there's a felt mat in the middle, and one person reads an idea out, pops it on the felt. Next person reads an idea out, pops it on the felt. But it's the toolkit that is helping people do that. So the facilitator's not having to go in and force people to listen to each other and dominate that process. It's enabled by the toolkit. Mm-hmm. And then structuring the effective creative thinking comes from proceeding through a series of clear focus activities. So asking different kinds of questions about the same topic. This is very much influenced by De Bono's creative thinking method. And we have a metaphor of growth in the colors of the leaves. The brown soil, what's good, what are the resources, what are the existing assets? The green shoots of new ideas, what could be done differently? Grey clouds that bring in rain, and usually in Manchester when you say that, it either is raining or it's about to rain. We're on about to rain right now. But rain grows more plants. Let's grow the solutions. What are the solutions to those rain clouds? And then the yellow sunshine, what's the goals or the actions? What's driving this? How do you take it forward? And building that metaphor of growth means that you start with the positive, what's good? And that fundamentally changes the way people approach thinking. Because if you start with the problems, it's very hard to think of really creative solutions. But if you start with what's good, you're already on a better track. But even more important, it changes the power dynamic. Because again, it's that thinking positively. If you start with what are the problems, what you're setting up is a dynamic that people who are in this workshop, are people with problems and I'm the expert with answers. But if you start with what resources and assets have you got, so in Lesotho, what was working, what matters, what have you got here? What do you care about in your community? What could be different? Then you've got a completely different dynamic of thinking. And then the dream scenarios, then you add in the round view. Okay, so what works, what could be different? Round view. Now what could be different? What else does this make us think of? Ideas, barriers, solutions, goals, round view again. Let's just test. Okay, let's prioritize and think about what we want to do. And that's when you're getting into that linking ideas over time and place. Take ideas, turn them into priorities, do something, learn from it, test it through the round view, make sure that you're moving in the right direction. What else could we be doing? So it sort of becomes a process of learning. I mean, I suppose that is the other part of the dream here, is it isn't just every person within walking distance of a round view kit in a cultural or library space. It's not just that, but it's also that we've got this process of visioning and imagining at multiple levels of scale. What does that mean for our neighborhood, for our town, for our farm, for the companies in our place? So it's that visioning process as well. That's my other part of the dream, is that we turn that into action through creative visioning in multi-scaled sort of community and participatory engagement.
No, that's
it's quite an important part of the puzzle.
A real wonderful equality of thinking and doing.
Well, it all came from just necessity. I mean, there I was, sort of like I say, permaculture, we've got to plant trees. But I can't just tell you that. We need to work together. And both of these toolkits just came, I invented them because I needed it, and then started to see how useful they could be for other people. So I think so much of what I'm trying to do, and we've been trying to do, is to make it easy for other people to run effective workshops, to build in this kind of thinking, and to hear all these voices in really creating visions for the future. It's all about getting it to scale and out there in a way that's meaningful and empowering.
Well, a lot comes to mind, including Donella Meadows' work.
Yeah, hugely inspirational. Yeah, I mean, like I say, I was standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, Donella Meadows, Bill Mollison and John Holmgren with permaculture, Tony Buzan with mind mapping. When you look at Ketso, it's very much inspired by mind mapping, De Bono and creative thinking, Carl-Henrik Robert and the natural step, and just, so many amazing thinkers that, and in fact, for me, a real turning point was reading Fritjof Capra's The Turning Point. Right at the time of the farm, and then thinking, hang on, reality is a bit different to what we're being taught in school and in science. And I was so lucky. I was on the UK. For years I was on the board of the UK System Society, and we had Fritjof Capra come to speak, and Umberto Maturana come to speak. It was just extraordinary. Yeah. Although the very first talk I gave, I had just finished my PhD, and I had put in a paper, and I thought, oh, great. Okay. So, and then I suddenly looked at and we'd been hiking and camping, and I was actually camping on the fairground in Oxford because we couldn't afford to stay in a hotel. Might have to edit this bit out, but it's quite funny. So I was going to an academic conference, kind of getting straw out of my hair, like, okay, I can do this, you know. Yes, I slept in a tent on a fairground last night, but I can stand up and be an academic in this crowd. And then I looked at the program, and I was on first as a speaker before Umberto Maturana. He was sitting I mean, one of my absolute intellectual heroes was sitting on the front row, and I hadn't realized I was actually in the plenary speaking.
Wow.
And luckily I was wearing a dress because my legs were shaking so much. And I don't think anybody could tell because I had a dress on.
A great story.
It was incredible. And the talk went really well. But what a privilege.
Yeah.
Yeah. His Matron and Varela's idea of autopoiesis and thinking about the self-creation of meaning and boundaries has sort of profoundly influenced my thinking about design.
Yeah.
And Ketso and Roundview are almost just like the practical outcomes of that.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with autopoiesis through Nicholas Luhmann's work. Do you remember that TV show with John Hurt in it called The Storyteller?
No.
It's lovely, traditional tales. And there's a story about a traveller who upsets a cook, and rather than getting beaten, he goes, "Wait, I'll teach you how to make very special soup, stone soup."
Oh.
And he's got this stone and he puts it in the pot. He goes, well, all I need is, it's as good as good, but we just need a little bit of onion. No, it's good, but just, do you have a carrot? And by the end of the process, there's this delicious soup. And the stone is almost, but it's a MacGuffin. It's beside the point. But it led the process to become real.
That makes me think a little bit about the very physical nature of the toolkits that I've developed, which has been both part of their, I think, profound value, but one of the limiting factors, because it does cost some money to make these things. Now, I met a student today, a former student, who at the moment we give every student on the postgraduate class I teach and our undergraduates a Ketso Connect, which was a pandemic invention, which was basically we couldn't get the students to the Ketso, so we sent Ketso to all of our students and we made a little envelope and we sent it to them, and they would be writing on the leaves and putting them on the felt and sharing pictures in breakout rooms during the pandemic. And I've been able to give each of the students I teach a Ketso Connect, and we use it in workshops. They use it to plan their essays. And one of the students said, even now, she does use it still, but also the way of thinking that it inculcated, the idea of the different colors and, hang on, let me think of the brown leaves. So it does help inculcate a habit of mind, but the physical toolkit is just so lovely to use and so much. And I don't know how much you get that habit of mind without the physical learning together and the physical activity.
There's a physical mnemonic to memory, isn't there?
Yeah.
That's why, my house is filled with tat to anybody else's eyes. But, that's an acorn I picked up on that walk in that forest.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this connection with our physicality, which, I do a lot of digital stuff, but the digital doesn't have the same. It's not the same as the physical affordances of the real world. So,
but it can reach more people in different ways. And how do we bring the two together in an effective way? I suppose
indeed, horses for courses and appreciating all things for what they are. Yeah. So, well.
Yeah, there we go. We went off on another tangent, but quite an important tangent. Yes, I forgot Ketso. My goodness. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and I'm inspired to see possibly do a round view up in Edinburgh.
Indeed. Yes, would love that. In fact, another former student is up in Edinburgh at the moment and is going to meet me in Glasgow next week and bring over a few kits to loan to another colleague. So there will be some Roundview kit in Edinburgh as of next week.
Well, I will see if I can, because I've told you I'm scheduling up 18 months of work. So,
well, I would love to come up. I love Edinburgh.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Then you must.
yeah, and I'd love that. And Edinburgh's a UNESCO City of Literature, so we could maybe get them involved. That might be nice. Yeah.
I can book. I'll send you through dates
Sure.
that I've sort of peeled out of Arts, Scott Arts, and the CEO was fantastic.
Oh, fab. Yeah.
He is. He really understands the world without insisting it's all got to be a financially lucrative business.
Oh, I'd love to come up and run a workshop. Maybe, yeah, that'd be great. And right now, there's a colleague in the business school at Edinburgh who's keen to start using Roundview, so she could maybe bring. Yeah, there's various connections. It would be lovely to make. Yeah.
And have I mentioned Antonella Stariacci?
Yes, but I can't remember what. I remember the name, but that's as far as I've got in my.
Her big vision is connecting the world through the importance of bilingualism.
Oh. Well, my real Glasgow connection is Alison Phipps with this, who's in this School of Education, and kind of she's the UNESCO chair for refugee integration through languages and the arts.
Oh. Wow. Right. Well.
Yeah. So.
Antonella, the beginning of April, because again, just long-term collaborators. She's done lots of.
To look at some of the. Maybe we could do some poetry readings in different languages, that kind of thing. Yeah.
The research is absolutely clear.
The
more languages you speak, the more activity that goes on, the more ways you can see the world, the more benefits that come. It just seems a lovely way of the world recognizing and thriving through going. Right? We mustn't homogenize. We mustn't.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, the languages have been so important in the Roundview. It just we haven't quite got to where we want to with turning it into the physical tools, but we are just about to launch the website where you can at least say, show me that poem in whichever languages we've got. And we've got some recordings. So, and then that's got to be a growing library. Yes.
Well, I shall mention your work to Antonella, and I'll say because she's got 26 centres around the world. Bilingualism matters, and I may be helping out with her web development.
Oh, fab!
So
getting some bilingual toolkits in various places would be nice, wouldn't it?